Hi there. Welcome to Conversations for Yoga Teachers. I'm so glad you're here. I'm your host, Karen Fabian, the founder of Bare Bones Yoga. On the show, I help yoga teachers make sense of the parts of teaching that often feel harder than expected, especially around anatomy and how to apply it to your cues and your sequences, and how to truly feel confident when you're teaching your classes. Here, you'll learn easy, practical ways to understand anatomy using my step-by-step blueprint and how to apply it directly to your cues and sequences so teaching feels clearer and more grounded, so you feel present and more confident. We'll also talk honestly about the inner side of teaching, things like self-doubt, growth, and what actually helps you feel confident over time. You can find daily videos and additional support over on my Instagram and my TikTok channels. On both those platforms, I'm at Bare Bones Yoga. All right, let's get into today's episode. Hi there. Welcome to Conversations for Yoga Teachers. I'm your host, Karen Fabian, and this is episode 388. I'm recording this on January 22nd, 2026. And this will go live on January 26th of 2026. So that's kind of a good vibe there. All the numerology fans out there. So today I wanted to talk to you about a particular situation that can come up. And it's definitely something I hear a lot from yoga teachers. And I'm going to tell you about it in a second in terms of the theme. I want to start out, though, by describing how this actually showed up in me today, like literally just today. So I started my day with kind of my normal routine. And when I made it to Starbucks after walking the dog and going actually for a long walk because it's actually really nice out today before we expect a big snowstorm this weekend, I had only just quickly scrolled through social media in the morning. But when I sat at Starbucks, I found myself reopening up my phone and I was going to just spend a little time perusing Instagram and TikTok. And the very first social media post I saw on each platform triggered me. And when I say triggered me, what I mean is it made me feel jealous. Now, these two posts were not from yoga teachers, but they were from two women who I follow on social media that are in the entrepreneurial space. They both do different things, but they both recently just got book deals. And both of those posts, when I saw them, and I love these two women, I admire them greatly. I have just so much joy for the success that they are experiencing. They're considerably younger than me. I think both of them are in their 30s. I'm 61. But all that considered, I still felt triggered. Now, having said that, I've written two books, albeit self-published books, which is a very different experience than when you get I don't want to say hired, when you get a book deal, which is basically a sign of your reach, the scope of what you're doing, the connection of what you're doing to what people want to hear more about. And so there's definitely a different level of aura and accomplishment and all of that comes with getting a book deal. So I just wanted to share that story as an introduction to the theme of what we're going to be talking about today, which is comparison, comparing yourself to other yoga teachers. So do you find yourself comparing how you teach to other teachers? And if so, what is the trigger? Maybe you are taking somebody's class. It could even be the person who trained you. It could even be at the studio where you took your teacher training. It could even be a friend of yours, someone whose class you deeply love, but at the same time, you feel triggered when you take the class. It could be similar to what I just described, something you're seeing on social media. Matter of fact, I recently stopped following a yoga teacher who I really have a tremendous amount of respect for, because when I saw one of her posts, I was triggered into that feeling of, why not me? I feel a little bit jealous there. So I just decided I was going to take a mental break from seeing this person's post, and I just stopped following them. And I would highly recommend you do that as well if you're noticing that you're triggered by seeing certain people's social media posts. Your social media should not be a source of anxiety for you. And that's obviously a whole other conversation about different things. But in regards to what we're talking about here, it's not that you should endure feeling badly about yourself when it comes to your social media. So I would highly encourage you, if you're experiencing any of that when you scroll on social media, just disconnect from the people that trigger you. But it does bring up a bigger question. So if we go back to the experience of taking somebody's class, somebody you know, somebody you don't know, and having that feeling of being triggered, what was it that brought that up? Maybe it was this feeling of, oh, their cues are so much better than mine, or, oh, they seem like they have such confidence in what they're doing, or, oh man, I wish I could walk around the room and look as comfortable and confident as this teacher. Or one of the ones I hear a lot is, I went and took this person's class and their sequence was so cool. It had all these different things in it. And I went home and immediately reworked my sequence because I felt like it just wasn't good enough. So if you've experienced any of these things, I want you to know that you are definitely not alone. I mean, not only did I just share my own experience of comparing myself to somebody else, but I have worked with teachers in my one on one program, in my accelerator group program, who have expressed these things to me. It's very common experience. So I want to just normalize it for you. It's sort of part of the human condition that we tend to compare ourselves to other people. And it's only amplified because of the kind of world we live in now, where we walk around with a little computer in our pocket, where we have access to all sorts of people all over the world, all different ages, all different backgrounds. It's just ripe for comparing yourself to other people. So, I'm old enough to remember when we didn't have cell phones. And so you didn't have so many triggers. But even back when I first took my very first yoga class in 1999, walking into that room, I absolutely remember when the teacher walked in. And at that point, I had only taken one yoga class in my entire life. But when that teacher walked in the room, immediately I was like, wow, look at her. She's so beautiful and she's in such amazing shape. I mean, it just is I think, a natural part of the human condition to compare ourselves to other people. Now, comparison can bring up a way of being that we want but don't have. And when I say way of being, it's often encapsulated for teachers in this way of how you would describe the person. Oh, she was walking around the room and looked so comfortable and confident. She didn't practice with her students. She just stood there and was able to look out into the room and seem to be in such calm, confident control of what was going on. So that's just one example. But it's this sort of comparing yourself and wanting to have a different way of being than what you have right now when you're teaching. The other thing comparing ourselves can do is bring up a knowledge gap. I use this word gap a lot because in a lot of the conversations I have with teachers, they'll describe to me how they're feeling and some of the problems they're having. And underneath it is a realization that they might not have even come to yet about what's missing in their teaching. And that was one of the things I talked about in last week's episode, the difference between how you want to be teaching versus how you're teaching now. And I framed it that way intentionally because I wanted, as you listen to that, I wanted to bring that gap more to the surface for you so that you could start to just be a little more objective about what's missing from how you're teaching now. Now, the other thing that comparing yourself to other teachers can do is it can highlight a desire to teach in a certain way. Like for some teachers, they maybe weren't even aware of a particular way of teaching until they went and took somebody else's class. I think of this too when I think of a recent teacher who graduated from the accelerator program. And one of the things she really wanted to do was the walk and talk. And we worked on that when she was coming to the sessions. And I was coaching her on, different ways to bring that technique into her classes. And when I chatted with her recently, she said, not only do I love doing the walk and talk, but I'm really the only one in the studio where I teach that does it. So for someone like her, she had no role model. She had nobody showing her a way of teaching, but yet innate in her way of being, she knew that was the way she wanted to teach. For you, it might be something that comes from taking somebody's class and having just like a healthy observation. Man, I'd like to walk around the room more, and I've never really seen this done before. And this looks like something that I'd like to do more of in my classes. So I can remember, one of the stories I wanted to tell you, which is related to this whole idea, is a teacher who, again, was in my accelerator program. And I get a lot of my stories from working with teachers in that program. And I love that because they're real life, experiences that teachers have and share with me. And I remember when I was talking to this teacher, he was saying to me that he was super nervous because he was going to be covering a class for the teacher who trained him in the studio where his teacher training was and where he also practiced. So the deck was, in his mind, really stacked against him. The comparison game was so active in his mind because he was thinking, not only do I practice at this studio, that means I know the people that go to the studio as my friends and fellow students, but I'm going to be covering for the person who trained me, and I'm definitely not as good as she is. And I'm going to be teaching in this studio where where students have a certain, in his mind, he thought it was a certain expectation of what a good yoga class should look like. So this is another way that teachers are often triggered around this whole idea of taking somebody else's class, or in this instance, having to cover for another teacher. Matter of fact, I remember one of the teachers last year who I worked with in my one on one program, which is the Yoga Anatomy Blueprint Learning Program. And in that program, it's one on one. So I get into more one on one coaching with teachers versus the accelerator where it's a group. And so teachers tend to bring up things that are much more individualized to them. And they still do it to a certain extent in the group program, but when you're having one-on-one calls twice a month, you tend to really leverage that opportunity to bring up the kinds of things that are really, customized to you and what you're experiencing and goals you have, things like that. And she was telling me how she was having a tough time finding time for her own practice. So there was this one class that was right after when she taught, and she was taking this class, but every time she took the class, she just felt so triggered by this comparison game. And so I asked her, I said, well, would it be possible for you, or would you be willing to experiment? I know it's been hard for you to find time for your own practice, but would you be willing to experiment with going to somebody else's class in service to you not having these negative experiences of comparing yourself to other people, namely this teacher? And she said, yeah, she goes, I think it's kind of at the point where I need to do that because it's not helping me to continue to take this person's class. And so the next time we hopped on a one-on-one call, she said, "Oh my God, Karen, you're never going to believe it. I found this local studio that I'd never been to. I found a time when I could go take class there. And I took a couple of classes there from this person I did not know. And not only did I not experience any of that comparing myself, but I also found that the experience was so grounding and clear. The way he put the sequence together, it wasn't complicated. And at the same time, it was really profound. And she went on to describe her experience a little bit more. And the reason I'm sharing with you is that but for her willingness to experiment with something different, she would have never gone to this person's class. And it also acknowledged in a way how she was feeling, at least in the moment, to prevent her from continuing to like stick her hand in the fire out of service in her mind to something like, oh, I need to just suck it up and go to this person's class, even though I don't feel good about myself when I do. So again, these experiences are normal. These experiences are sort of amplified in the yoga industry because there is so much out there between social media and going to people's classes and students who idolize teachers. I mean, I've told this story before, but I can remember I was covering for somebody. It was a last minute thing. And when I was getting set up to teach and somebody walked in to take the class, they said to the girl at the front desk, "Why is she here?" And they pointed to me. And the front desk person said, "Oh, well, she's covering for so and so because so and so had an emergency." And this woman left. She did not want to take my class. And in that moment, I could have stood there and compared myself to the teacher I was covering for and let it be a barrier to teaching the class. But I didn't. I just, in that moment, said to myself, I know who I am. I'm confident in the kind of teacher I am, and I taught the class. And it was my duty to teach the class. I was there to keep the ball rolling. And so this is part of what I shared with this other teacher who was covering for his teacher, the teacher who trained him. That was part of the aspect of what we discussed. And I also discussed this with another teacher recently. This idea that when you're covering for another teacher, you're in a really special role. But for you, that class wouldn't happen. You're stepping in to keep the ball rolling for the students. So if somebody doesn't like you or really is upset that you're covering for the regular teacher, so what? That's on them. You have a higher purpose for being there, and it's to keep the ball rolling even when the regular teacher can't be there. And when I was sharing it with this other teacher, she said, "Oh, I never thought about that aspect." So it's almost like you have to kind of rise above some of the pettiness that might show. And students do that. They do sometimes develop an unhealthy attachment to their yoga teacher, where it becomes more about the teacher and less about the practice. And that's an unfortunate thing, but I think in today's world, in all areas of fitness and wellness, I know from being on social media, there's a lot of, unhealthy attachments that are created, this parasocial relationship that people sometimes have with people they have never even met in real life. But I think in the yoga industry, it's amplified sometimes because this person is teaching you yoga, and sometimes the transformations you go through as a result of taking their class, you somehow attest to that person, when really it's about the practice. It's not really about the person. So, anyway, so I want to just shift now into a bit of a reframe. Now that we've talked at length about the problem and how it might show up, let's talk a little bit about the reframe. So, when I was telling you earlier about what I was experiencing this morning when I scrolled through social media and I saw these posts from these two different women and the book deals they both had, my immediate reaction was to be jealous. And then I immediately said to myself after that, why not me? And I encourage you to do that too. When you take somebody's class and you feel triggered by it, as soon as you can, move from that feeling and ask yourself, well, why not me? Why not me to be the teacher teaching in a way that feels more confident, has a great sequence, is sharing clear cues? Because when you ask it that way, you'll realize there's nothing standing in the way for you to be teaching the way you want. Even though the mind wants to take you into that negative comparison game, why not you? There's no reason in the world why you can't teach the way you want to teach. The other point is, I don't know if you've ever heard the saying, contrast provides clarity. I think it comes from Abraham Hicks, which is a self-help entity, person. And this idea that when you go and take someone else's class, or when you compare yourself to somebody on social media or another yoga teacher in whatever format, you're in their training or whatever it is, in that comparison that you're doing, you're saying, here's me and here's this person. And so there's contrast there. And in that contrast, you can reach some clarity around what qualities do you want that you don't have? What skills do you want that you don't have? So in the contrast, it provides the clarity, not to say you need to try to emulate this person or be like this person or mimic this person, but just at a high level, what are the qualities? What are the skills? What is the knowledge? So contrast provides clarity. So it's more of what can I learn from how I'm feeling about what I need to learn. And then the other piece, and I really leaned into this morning, is what do I love about me that makes me different, that makes me unique? Because even if a yoga teacher you emulate trained you, there are still qualities that you have that that person doesn't have. And the more you're willing to lean into that when you're teaching, the more your unique wonderfulness will start to shine through. So, overall, when I look at this idea of comparing, the comparison to another teacher, the main difference is it often boils down to a lack of understanding why things work the way they do at the technical level. So, why certain cues work, how to put certain poses together in a particular sequence, why the anatomy is what it is for certain cues. So, I know part of what I'm talking about is way of being, but part of it is also a lack of understanding. So, a lot of times when you go to somebody else's class and when you're in that comparison game, many times the main difference is you having a lack of understanding, maybe, see if this resonates with you, around things you're observing about this person. Well, this person seems to really know how to put a sequence together. Well, maybe that's an area where you're lacking. Or this person really seems to understand the anatomy and how to share it in an easy way for students to understand. Well, maybe that's an area where you're lacking. And when I say lacking, I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, again, contrast provides clarity. So I want to give you a reflection question exercise to do. And this really works best if you write it out. So obviously, I know you're listening. If you have an opportunity to re-listen to this and write down your answers, that would be ideal, but consume it as you wish. So I'm going to give you a statement and I'm going to leave some blanks, and I want you to fill in the blanks. And we're going to frame it around the experience of going to take someone's yoga class. If you want to substitute a different experience, you can certainly do that. The reason I'm using this kind of experience is because this is most commonly when this is the most common scenario for when this comparison situation comes up. So when I went to so-and-so's class, I felt triggered. What came up for me was a feeling of blank. Okay, so you're going to fill in that blank. I wish I could teach more like blank. So it's not going to be the person's name. It's going to be you describing how you want to be teaching. But now I'm teaching more like blank. And that's where you would describe how you're teaching now. So that's the contrast. Okay. What I need so that I can be teaching more like how I want to teach is blank. Okay. So you see how this works. I'm having you relive the experience of taking someone's class. I'm having you identify how it made you feel. Then I'm having you identify your desire. I wish I could teach more like blank. And then contrast that with how you're teaching now. But now, instead of teaching like that, I'm actually doing this instead. What I need, though, so I can shift into teaching the way I want is, so let's just do an example. I'll do an example with you to fill in the blanks. When I went to Sarah's class, I felt triggered. What came up for me was a feeling of inadequacy, was a feeling of being less than. I wish I could teach more like the kind of teacher that used cues that really landed on students' bodies, really were understood clearly by students. But right now, I'm teaching more like I'm saying the same cues over and over again, and I have no idea if they're landing on my students' bodies because I'm practicing with them. So I can't really see if they're landing well. What I need so that I could be teaching more like I want is I need training to help me understand how to share clear cues. So that's an example. So going through this example, now you're clearer, hopefully, on what you need that can bring you closer to your desired way of teaching. So as we wrap this up, I'm curious if hearing this episode helped you to realize that comparison comes up for you. And again, if it does, totally understandable, totally normal. So if hearing this made you realize that comparison keeps showing up for you, especially around things like cueing, sequencing, understanding anatomy, that's something worth noticing. That's something worth noticing. And I want you to notice that it's not about hours. It's not about me talking about hours of training. It's about me talking with you about the things that matter to you and the things you're noticing. This is deep work. This is not follow what everybody else is doing stuff. So this concept of seeing like what keeps coming up for you, this is exactly why I created my program, the Yoga Anatomy Accelerator. Not so that you can copy what other people are doing, but that you can get the support you need to step into your own way of teaching, whatever that looks like for you. And if you're curious and you want to learn more about the program to see if it's a fit for you, I'll include the link in the show notes. If you're not curious and you're not interested in taking a look, that's okay. Maybe just take whatever resonated with you from this episode. And as you teach over the next couple of weeks, just notice what comes up for you. As you take people's classes over the next couple of weeks, just notice what comes up for you. Now, I want to close by bringing up one final thing. I had a conversation with a teacher, and she was referencing something I discussed with you in December. I did an episode in December, and I might have even mentioned this a couple of times in the month of December about how the enrollment process for the Yoga Anatomy Accelerator works. And back in early December, I was thinking about heading into 2026 this year with a different approach, one where I only accepted new enrollments in the first week of the year. And over the holidays, 2025, the New Year's holidays, Christmas, New Year's, I was doing a lot of work around what did I want my 2026 to look like in terms of how I support teachers. And I decided that the idea of restricting enrollment to just the first week of the month really was more about me and less about what teachers need. It was more about me trying to control when you might have that moment of realizing, hey, I'm ready to take the next step and get the support I need so that I can be the teacher I want to be. And I'm not embarrassed to say that. I mean, I was just in a mode where I was trying to control that. And I was trying to control it in a way almost to sort of force you to fit into a certain way of consuming this, not even information, but just taking that step forward. So, bottom line, you can enroll in the Yoga Anatomy Accelerator anytime during the month. And because the program is run on a month to month basis, you can enroll in the beginning of the month if you want, and you'll be with me for session 1, 2, 3, 4 in sync with the calendar, with the month. Or you can enroll anytime during the month and you can watch some of the replays for the sessions that have occurred for that month and then join the sessions that are remaining for that month and be completely up to speed. So you have the flexibility with the way that I offer the program to enroll anytime during the month and still get the outcome and the result that you want. The idea of the program is to support you when you are ready to take that next step forward. Okay, so if you have any questions, let me know. Again, the link to the program is in the show notes for this episode. It's also on my Instagram and also on my website. Alrighty, it was great to spend time with you, and I'll chat with you next week on the next episode. Have a good one. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If anything we talked about resonated with you, especially around anatomy, cueing, or feeling more confident when you teach, I want you to know that you are not alone. A lot of teachers tell me these are definitely challenges for them. As a thank you for being a podcast listener, I'm offering you $50 off my 4-week Yoga Anatomy Accelerator Program. It's a short, focused program designed to help yoga teachers learn anatomy in an easy step-by-step way and how to apply it directly to their teaching. To get the podcast listener discount, you can head over to my Instagram and just send me a DM with the words podcast offer. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you in the next episode.